Joel had a diagnosis of autism.
Yeah.
He was assigned to an integrated classroom. The first day of class, he was assigned to the college. I went to Mr. Foley, the director of the school, and I told him, this is not an appropriate placement for Joel. Well, you have to talk with the special ed department. And I said, yes, I know that, but he just started school. Could you please put him in inclusive classroom while we'll deal with the situation so Joel doesn't get affected? He stopped talking to me.
Okay.
And he's the director of the school.
Okay, let me say this. We are obligated, the school and my office, are obligated to implement the IEP that your child has.
The IEP say it.
Says what? Integrate.
Integrate.
Right, okay.
And he stopped talking to me.
What grade level?
K1.
Okay, so I know that we talked the last time, and if it isn't fixed now, we'll talk again after this meeting tonight.
But I'm just going back to the Conley school director. He did not talk to me anymore, and that's not the
I
way
can't-
the principal should deal with
I know the principal at the Conley School, and I don't believe he would intentionally not talk to a parent. He may have asked for help from my department and didn't get it. So I've got to find out what happened so that I can try to solve the problem. I will do that. It was a question.
I just want to ask, what is the proportion of the autistic kids and the regular in the inclusive class, and the other one is, what is, because I don't have too much information, that's why I'm asking, what's the chance of the autistic kids who are in the inclusive class going to the regular classes?
Okay. Two different questions, right? Yeah. So the first question, what's the proportion of children with autism to typically developing kids in an inclusive class? Actually, there's one question we have to answer before that. How big is the class? So first the question is, how big should the class be if there are going to be children with autism included into it? And then once you set the class size, how many children on the autism spectrum should be there? There are 5 or 6 different models being developed right now in the Boston public schools that look a little different from place to place depending on the level of what grade level it is and what the disability area is. Classes that are including autistic children with autism tend to be smaller classes with lower numbers of autistic kids. But there's no single answer yet. So what I've recommended is, in no situation should the number of children with disabilities total in the class be more than 1/3 of the class. The only reason I say that is there's some research that suggests that. We have some classes already in the school district that existed before I got here, where more than that is true. There's a higher proportion than that, and we're working to try to change that now. And the second question, for a child who's in a highly specialized strand for children with autism, how much do they have the opportunity to spend time in general education? Was that the question?
After if the autistic class,
Yeah.
who are in the inclusive classes, the autistic kids in the inclusive classes are getting better and better. What is the chance of these kids to go to the regular school in the future?
Well, I think that's an individual, I think the answer is individual. So one child may need to be in an autism program for 6 or 8 years. Another child might need to be in that program for a few years and then gradually move into general education. And then we have many children on the autism spectrum right now who are mainly in general education and getting some help outside. So these children are all different from one another. I'm sure I'm not telling you anything. You know this. They're all different from one another. And there is a problem with I try not to make general statements about any groups of kids. So children with autism are as different from one another as all children are different from one another. Yeah.
Yeah, 2 years ago, when we had my son's first IEP, we followed the advice of the team leader and put him in an inclusion program. And we're just time and again frustrated with, I mean, there are a number of issues, but I guess the main thing right now is, I mean, with respect to what you're talking about, is that we just really feel that the school in general, and sometimes even his inclusion teacher, who's supposed to be special ed trained, just doesn't get autism. They're just not trained, they have no familiarity with spectrum issues. And time and again, it seems like my son is blamed for his disability. And so we're thinking really hard and serious about trying to get him in a STRAND program, because the inclusion program, like I said, there are a number of different issues, but one of them is that the general staff, the principal, and sometimes even his homeroom teacher, just don't get his disability. They're not trained in it. So I guess my question, what I'd like to hear from you is, what do you see as, going forward, how are you going to get the general staff, the non-special ed teachers and administrators, trained so that they have some sort of capacity for including kids on the spectrum and other kids with other kinds of disabilities?
So it's a central question that applies for too many schools and too many kids still. My commitment to that is to provide the kind of professional development for principals and teachers that they need all over the school district. And we've already identified, for instance, in the area of autism, we've already identified the experts and the agencies that are going to be providing that professional development. We're in the process of trying to get it started now. We also are trying to be very selective. We're trying to think carefully about which schools are the inclusive schools for which kinds of kids. So because my experience with lots of principals, hundreds of principals over my career, is principals are not all the same, and some are inclined in one direction or another. And we're trying to know them very well and nurture those relationships and those schools. Now, if I were in your shoes, if I were the parent of a child with autism in an inclusive setting, and I didn't feel like it was really successful for my child, you have two pretty good options. One is you could ask for a reevaluation or a reconvening of his team. And in that context, you could ask that he be placed in a different inclusive setting, one that you think would be better for him.
By setting, you mean a different school?
Different school, yeah. Or if you're, it's not unusual that during the educational career of a child with disabilities, they may need to spend some time in a highly specialized stream. You think about our own lives. We didn't develop over a straight line. We had ups and downs and changes in our lives. The kids do. And sometimes it's the adult's fault, and sometimes it's something that's going on inside the child. But kids change over time. And so I'm trying to encourage parents to understand that my obligation is to offer full inclusion, partial inclusion, and substantially separate. And then we've got to match the right setting for your child at any moment in time. So this year, the child might do very well in an inclusive setting. And next year, he may need a more highly specialized setting.
We did a reconvening last year because of certain issues. I believe that the assistant director that was helping us with that has left. So we kind of lost our contact. Who should we call to he just had his IEP earlier this month. So who should we talk with about that?
Who was the person who left, do you know?
She wasn't officially on the team, but she just,
Was it Melissa?
no, it was Nilsa Reyes.
Oh, Nilsa, okay. And what grade level is your child?
He's in 4th right now.
Okay. So I would say you should call Seth Bartholomew.
Okay, well, we're still waiting for him to respond to our last call.
He's being deluged.
That's what we figured, but
I'll
that's-
take your information tonight, because I'm trying to give him some support, because he's being deluged with everything, so, I'll provide that backup.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily have a question. I just wanted to share something with all parents of what I did to make it easier. My son started out in an all-autistic class, and he was high functioning, so they wanted to put him in an integrated class. So what I had them do was go in the integrated class a couple of hours a day. And then it was too much for him, so they put him back and they did an hour a day. And then they gradually increased it. Then he went to the integrated class, and then by being around typical peers, he became more high functioning, so they put him in a regular class. And we did the same thing, a couple of hours a day, he would go in the regular class. The school was honest and told me the teacher doesn't have training with autism, but she'd be willing to work with me. So what I did was I had his behavioral specialist go into the regular class, meet with the teacher and explain, this is what you should be doing, this is how you should have it set up. Then I went and met with the teacher and I said, this is how my son will function well. So if you have your therapist and yourself working with the teacher, and she's a good teacher, she'll do the best she can. And it worked. Today he's in a regular classroom doing fine
Which school?
at the Jackson Man. He started out in the all-autistic program, and 3 years later he's in the regular class. It is a lot of work for parents, but if you have good therapists that will go with you to the school and work with you, it works.
Well, and we've increased our staff who are highly trained in autism. We now have 4 people in my office who are master's level BCBAs. And one of their jobs is to partner with parents and teachers.
Yeah, I mean, the teacher was honest. She did say, if your child comes to my class, I don't have any autism training, but I'll be willing to learn.
I'm glad that she said that.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So with these inclusion classrooms, are all teachers in the inclusion classroom dual certified special ed and regular ed? And is that why it takes time for schools to become inclusion schools?
There are, I mentioned 5 or 6 different models. One of the models is that the teacher is dual certified. Another model is that there are 2 teachers, a general ed teacher and a special ed teacher. Another model is that they couple 2 classes together. They have 2 general ed teachers and 1 special ed teacher for 2 classes. So there are a number of different models. But your point is right. When we're looking, when the model that a school is using is the dual certified model, it's difficult to find those people. And which model should be used is more determined by who the kids are than by anything I think. So at certain grade levels with certain kinds of kids, you need 2 teachers, and in other grade levels for other kinds of kids, a dually certified teacher is good. And so there's not a single answer to that. That whole staffing issue that this gentleman brought up, and the training and understanding, is the reason why it moves more slowly than it should, than I'd like it to move. Yes?
When a child has autism, some of them, not all of them, cannot tolerate the noises and the loud.
Some children, right?
My son is one of them. We have to hear the one and then wait to
We are supposed to make accommodations. The IEP should say what's going to happen during lunchtime. And if it isn't, then we have to make it happen. And I got to tell you, there are many IEPs that address the issue of lunch. I've seen them.
My question is, one of the pamphlets that we get this week, I think, says, around Boston only, there are about 10,000 kids. About 10,000. Of course, I have heard from you. You said
About 11,000
Yeah.
students with disabilities.
What is causing this thing? Like, this much? Is somebody studying? Is it the climate? Is it the vaccine? Or is somebody responsible for studying this thing?
Well, let me try to put that in perspective for you. In the United States, the incidence rate of children with disabilities, on average across the country, is around 13%. In Boston, the incidence rate is 19%. And before I came here, I was working in many cities around the country as a consultant, and Boston had a reputation for what's called over-identification. That is, we would, more often than we should, identify a child as having a disability. When I got here, I looked into that. In fact, in the state of Massachusetts, there are 11 school districts, most of them urban, that identify at rates higher than ours. 20, 22, 25% of the kids in these districts are children with disabilities. In a very similar city in the Midwest or the Southwest, the incidence rate is 14 or 15%. Okay, so here's what I believe, and there's some research evidence of this, that this is not a Boston problem. This is not something that's going wrong here. In fact, if you see it as a Boston problem, then the problem is much greater in some other cities in Massachusetts that have higher incidence rates. This is a northeast problem. So in the northeast part of the country, the incidence rates are much higher than in other parts of the country. And there are some theories about why. One is that we have a population that's more concentrated here. We have more people per square mile than lots of other parts of the country. So there's just a lot more people here. And we have a much more diverse population than lots of other parts of the country. Diverse in terms of socioeconomic issues and health issues, etc. The other thing that's true is that a lot of this has to do with the habits of professionals like me. So I grew up as a special education teacher. I've been in the field for 40 years. When I was a young teacher, I was trained and I did what my training told me to do. I think there's a strong tradition in the Northeast professional community to find disabilities. So when we're looking, we find, you know. And there's much less of a tradition in other parts of the country. Having said that, the children most of the kids I know here, the 11,000 kids, and I've gotten to meet a lot of them since I've been here, most of them really have disabilities. You know, we didn't make this up. And our obligation is, if an evaluation team finds that a student has a disability, we serve them. It's a very interesting question, and one might be one that a group of us parents ought to look into together. Jack.
Hi, John. How are you?
Good.
This is an interesting topic, and it's one that caught my eye a couple of years ago. I was involved in putting together the original SpedPac response to the Council of Great City Schools analysis of special education identification in Boston. And the interesting thing is that the council relied on an epidemiological report that had been published in 2001. The authors one of the lead authors on that was a guy named David Urian, who's a neurologist at Children's Hospital. I spoke with Dr. Urian about that report because I was surprised that the Council of Great City Schools relied on a report and said, here we are over-identifying people. The report specifically talked about identifications, and Dr. Urian and his colleagues actually found the problem wasn't over-identification, the problem was the extremely high quality of medical care in the Boston area. That we have really, really good medicine here. And the access to high quality medical care for a broad range of the population means that actually it's a problem of underidentification in the rest of the country. Now, this is a very controversial report. I don't know of any other reports that substantiate that. I'm not a physician, so I can't talk to the methodology underlying the data. But it does seem to corroborate your anecdotal experience and mine, and I think everybody here, where we go, wow, actually, yeah. The kids that we're seeing that need help, they do need help. And which allows me to segue into my question. I know you've been answering a lot of questions about inclusion. I was very, very happy to see that, you know, we asked for like a couple of inclusion in the schools last year and we got 10, which is huge. I'm going to ask you two questions. One that's going to be hard to answer and one that I'm not sure you're going to want, but the really hard one is, given how those programs' implementations have occurred, for good or ill, would you do that again? Do you think that you've been granted the tools that you need to see those programs to fruition? And then a follow-up question to that would be, if you haven't, and I think perhaps you haven't, what can we as an organization and as a community do to see that you get the tools you need to succeed in this really aggressive program expansion?
I'm happy to answer both questions, actually. First of all, because we had stimulus money until the end of September, we invested a lot of money in expert consultation and professional development for inclusion. We have a team of experts now, 3 experts from around the country, who are here in Boston working with the 10 schools every month, offering professional development. So, do I have the tools that I need right now? Yes. And I'm very pleased with what's going on. But is there anything that the SpedPac can do? Yeah. I'm worried about next year because there's no more stimulus money, right? That extra federal money is gone. And so I have to figure out how I'm going to pay for consultation and professional development, not this school year, that's all paid for, but next school year. And so SpedPac advocating for resources for professional development and consultation to schools that are becoming inclusive schools, that's something you can do. I have to say there are 18 schools that self-identified as wanting to develop inclusive settings. Only 10 of them made the commitment to the professional development and consultation. So that's what we're doing, is 10. Okay? And I'm not being critical of the other 8. They just weren't in a position yet to make that kind of commitment. They have to invest time and effort into the professional development that has to go on. There's now, for the first time in history here, something called the Boston Inclusive Schools Network. And there are 18 schools in the network, but only 10 of those schools are actively implementing. I feel fine about that. I would have felt fine if 18 of them actively implemented, but that's just the way it goes. We're inviting schools all the time to join the network, and then we're asking, are you really ready to make a commitment to do the work that you have to do?
Thank you.